Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is Charles with the Exodus Logistics Learning Center's Freight Broker 101 training for beginners. How's everybody doing this evening? Can you hear? You probably can't see me because I don't have my video on, but I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. And then Mr. Erwin is on the phone.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Can you guys hear Mr. Erwin?
Yes.
Okay. So Mr. Erwin is, he has taught me a lot about freight brokering. I'll let Mr. Erwin give his story, his introduction first, and then I was going to allow just some, because he's an experience, he has over a number of years of brokering, and he can tell you his story, and then you guys can kind of pick his brain for, because some of you guys are like at the beginning stage of brokering. Some of you guys are looking for shippers. Some of you guys may have a shipper and looking for some techniques and strategies. So Mr. Erwin, if you don't mind, can you give a backstory of yourself and then leading up to today, if you don't mind, please?
Sure. Okay, folks, I've got about 31 and a half years, just over 31 years of experience in the transportation arena. Started out with a small trucking company initially. Soon thereafter, we opened up our first brokerage, and over the years, it grew, pretty much leaps and bounds after about the third year being in the business. To give you some idea, I'm a certified logistics practitioner. I'm one of 9 master freight brokers, and that's a little bit about my background. Had 54 agents that, the past up until a few years ago. When I retired pretty much from that, had 54 agents that worked under my auspices or my company's auspices that I owned. Had a small trucking company, relatively small. About 40, 45, 50 trucks. We concentrated more than anything on refrigerated freight. And for the most part, those dedicated runs were, on the East Coast. Freight that we brokered predominantly was for the most, mostly on the eastern half of the, this side of the Mississippi, but we certainly weren't limited to that. Whatever method Charles wants me to entertain, I'm happy to do it. Charles, I'm happy to attempt to do like question and answers type of thing. So anything that you guys have in mind that you'd like to ask me, I will do my very best to attempt to give you a response that's going to make sense for you.
I have a question. I'm just interested in knowing, obviously, as a new broker who has yet to broker any freight, what's the likelihood, or I guess what barriers were you guys able to overcome in the beginning without having broker credit established?
Now, when you tell me this, define broker credit. In other words, just you're referring to having a strong history of being knowledgeable, or are you defining broker credit in some other method?
Yeah, so actual credit, in terms of a shipper finding you credit worthy, I guess, to run the load.
I totally got you there. So what's going to happen is, during the time that I did it, it's going back in time, because I've been in it, like I said, over 31 years. It was not quite as difficult, though my credit was pretty darn good. Okay, but even with that, the guardrails weren't up then. Okay, so everything was a lot looser, and things weren't as stringent as they are today. I can be honest with you. I think one of the best things for yourself with a new operation, for you to give thought to, consideration, and truly probably go ahead and just entertain, is to go ahead and align yourself with a company, a factoring company. Certainly, I'm sure you're fairly familiar with those. But I think a factoring company might be, a helpful tool, because in reality, when you're latching on to a new customer, okay, then a factoring company that compensates the carriers, which half of them do that deal, rather than just pay you, they also, compensate the trucking company, the carrier. So that might be a helpful tool to put in your back pocket and share that with your customers. So then they can feel a bit more comfortable with the credit atmosphere that you were describing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Anyone else? Now, Mr. Erwin, were you working on any accounts currently? Because the last time you and I met, I think you were working on something, or
Right. I've been, to be honest, not given. My hands are out in 1,000 different directions, but I was able to secure. I think I know the one you're referring to. We actually secured that account. The operation started about 3.5 weeks ago. I think we're rounding the corner for being a month now, to the extent that we actually are anticipating payment on the first few loads that were brokered through the company now. So we've progressed with that. They did a relatively good job with one of the companies in particular, enough that it advanced from 3 loads from the first week to last week. I think it was like 17 loads that were made available to the company, and they covered each one of those loads. So that was very attractive to the shipper from starting out. So that's a good thing.
so with so I'm gonna pick your brain just a little bit, but it's easy. It's an easy picking, I guess. As brokers, right? We get our authority. We're active in everything, and when we approach shippers, we find a niche and everything. And let's say we cold call a shipper. What type of verbiage should we have on our minds? What is the techniques that you suggest?
Well, of course, some of the techniques is, number one, not to sound green, and by green, I mean unseasoned. Okay, so that's number one. You do want to sound confident, but not overbearing. So typically, once you mention niche, which is a key word, once you align your niche and decide in which type of directions you're going regarding that, then one of the first things that needs to be done is, prior to making you refer to it as a cold call or even a warm lead, then what you want to do is a little bit of history. So you want to gain a little bit of information about that shipper. So you want to do your homework, whether it's Google or whatever method you use. Attempt to gain a little information. One of the things that a shipper flat out despises is for you to call there and you know absolutely nothing about them. So to them, then they become a number. They feel as if they're nothing more than a number. You're calling 1,000 people a day, even though the reality is you might be, but they don't have to know that. They don't need to know that. So you want to make them feel, there's some importance there, and there's a reason for having a desire to move freight for them. Whether it be, for an example, you said you have multiple carriers that are unloading within a few miles of one of their facilities, and we're always looking for freight going back in other directions, various directions out of there. So you have to have a reason for calling them and be prompted and ready to share that with them, okay? In addition to that, you'd like to know a bit about them. If they've got 5 locations, it's good to know where those locations are. Now, certainly fine to ask questions. Once the doors open, they have a willingness to have conversation with you. Certainly you want to ask questions, but the key question to ask is, what do they need? Okay, guys, it's not about you ringing your bell saying you're the greatest broker on earth and you can perform all these miracles. It's more a matter of finding out what their needs are and having the ability to address their needs.
Okay. So let's say you've gotten past that stage and convinced them, and let's say a shipper says, I got a lane that I want you to I got a lane that a troubled lane, or a lane I need quoted, or as far as giving you a load tender, but they didn't give you the lane yet. So what, as a broker, how would you address that? Like, are there certain questions you need to jot down in order to provide a decent rate to come back to that shipper with, to see if you can get that tender, or how does that?
Well, here again, I mean, you want to share with them whatever those traffic lanes are. if they're going to verbally share them with you, if it's a handful, or if they will send you over a spreadsheet with the traffic lanes there, that sort of thing. So you want to gain that information. You want to ask them, what of those lanes are they have the most difficulty with, and is it a matter of rates or just capacity? Do they not have the truck availability there, fluently enough to entertain the amount of freight that they have, outgoing freight that they have? So that, again, you always want to put yourself in a position where you can become the problem solver for them. Oftentimes you'll find that the ability to fix their problems, oftentimes it usually overrides the rate. Of course they want it done for as little as possible, but usually they will not give that much consideration to the rate, provided you're able to provide what they're needing.
Okay, so now say they give you a load tender and things like that. I want to also ask you about, now with your brokerage, what did you specialize in? What was your niche at the time when you were brokering?
Our niche was refrigerated, and I'll share with you why. Share with you all why. I started out with refrigerated freight from the onset, so I got quite familiar with temperature control products. We did, just to give you some idea, we did a very large company. I was with them for over 30 years, called Smithfield Packing, which is the largest pork processor, not in the United States, but in the world. And I developed a rapport with them early on and maintained that relationship for many, many years. And I think that we maintained that relationship by satisfying all of their needs, no matter what. We would go above and beyond. And the result of that, as a result, we were rewarded with volume freight. But to sort of go back to what you were asking there, you've got, so you have your niche. You get grounded in, and once you prove yourself. So there's a period of time, usually with most shippers, that you have to prove yourself. And oftentimes that can happen in the first 2 weeks to 30 days. So not that you want to diminish your ability to do things properly after that, but you really want to, from the onset, you want to go above and beyond. Some of the things that, new freight brokers need to keep in mind is when you latch onto a new shipper, you don't want to do anything that's experimental. And what I mean by that is, if you've got any history at all, you want to select the carriers that you know are reliable, and carriers and drivers. So you want to have somewhat of a history with that particular carrier or with that driver to know that, he's hauled 3 or 4 loads or more for you in the past, and each time he's never been late picking up nor delivering. They're the key players that you want to send in there from the onset to have gain your weight, with that shipper early on, if that helps.
Okay. And I know we have Agility Freight in here. I think, Sherry Ann, you're here. You guys are your niche is reefers, yep. Right? Refrigerated.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So I kind of felt that Mr. Erwin's niche was refrigerated. So with refrigerated freight, is there like more risks with that one than the other two, like flatbeds or drive-ins, because of like claims, because of, you may show up to a receiver and your driver didn't have the temperature controlled continuous, or any, is there more risks with the refrigerated niche than the other two flatbeds?
Absolutely. And two things you just identified. Absolutely. Number one, anything that's refrigerated usually is perishable. Okay, so there's something called spoilage. Okay, so things can go bad, or temperatures can either elevate or drop below to the point that it gets chilled too much or frozen, and it becomes unacceptable. So and that happens especially with produce. Even though I spend a great deal of time with produce, but it happens with produce. So when you have accounts, moving produce, you really want a seasoned driver that has, a strong background with hauling produce. Because particularly if loads have more than one type of produce on it, which is commonly referred to as a mixer load or a mixed load, simply meaning there's more than one type of produce or fruit or whatever the case that's on the refrigerated trailer. With those, you need very, very good experienced drivers, because there's times when something becomes balanced. So you may have some product on there that typically requires 40 degrees. Some other product that might be typically set, like say sweet potatoes at 55. So you kind of want to split the difference there and not go over, too warm to cause the cooler stuff to get too warm a temperature, and just the reversal of that. So it takes a decent drive. Typically the financial reward is there with refrigerated freight, as opposed to dry freight and even flatbed freight. The dollars and cents for our broker standpoint usually is far greater, and that's one of the reasons why I concentrated on that. So I had a willingness to entertain, the various, hurdles to jump over to gain the additional finances, the funding that was coming in as a result of that. But claims, yeah, absolutely. You can have claims, and with produce, and they can be very, very fickle. The receiver for these distribution food centers, and they can get one box of product and have, a few, I'll use the word bad apples in the bunch, and just deny the whole entire load. And then that's, that becomes an immediate problem.
Okay.
I have a quick question, Charles.
Sure.
As a rule of thumb, what would you say is a good level of experience for a reefer driver?
You're talking to me now, Charles.
I'm sorry. Actually, this question was for you. What is your name? I'm sorry. I joined late. I apologize.
Okay, my name is Erwin.
Okay, Erwin.
Okay. Well, let's say this, and it's going to vary from driver to driver, but with the scenario, I guess, that I just described, that's what you're referring to. A driver who's got, a year or two, under his belt with hauling produce, that sort of thing. It's a little better. It gives you a little more of a comfort zone. You don't want someone brand smacking new picking up his first load of strawberries for you. I can tell you that. Strawberries are something that even I, occasionally we haul them, but we tend to stay away from them. Claims are abundant with strawberries. You can look at a strawberry and it will go bad. So that's another thing. If you're going to do produce, particularly until you really get your feet good and wet, do not entertain strawberries.
Okay. So what are the, in your experience, because I'm going to, I guess, direct it towards agility since they are concentrating on reefer freight. What are some good areas of the country to deal with refrigerated freight with?
Well, the obvious. Florida is an area that produces a tremendous amount of produce. Certainly not limited to Florida, but Florida is the agricultural area there about 7.5 months out of the year. So typically, Florida will start to trickle a little bit of growth of produce coming out, last week of October. By Christmas, they're, really at full gear. And then from January up to May, high gear. So freight becomes extremely abundant. And as it becomes abundant, I don't have to tell you, so the prices go north, so the truck, the broker benefits financially, and so does the truck during that time. First week of June, everything is starting to diminish. By the end of June, it's like a ghost town for the most part, okay? But produce haulers, as well as brokers, they do what's commonly referred to as following the produce. So though Florida may diminish during that time, you work your way north as a golden rule. So you come up there, some in Georgia, in South Carolina, in the North Carolinas, in both the Carolinas. You come on up, as you go north. And usually by the time you reach, if you peak out and you tend to go north, by the time you wind down and you get up in New Jersey and New York areas or Massachusetts, it's about the time that produce is about to come back off again, crops. down in Florida. So it's a complete, it's a cycle. So you can follow it. You may have, a total of 6 week gap in there with little activity, but those 6 weeks will probably be, welcomed by yourself, taking a little bit of vacation time, spend some of the money that you've made.
Okay. Anyone else before I ask another leading question?
Charles, I would just like to.
Go ahead, Key.
Yeah, I would just like to know, just overall in general, what advice would you offer to new brokers entering the market?
Good question.
That's a great question. It's a lengthy one for me to attempt to answer it. So many variables, man.
Let me break it down in chunks for you then, okay?
Go.
So just getting your authority as far as your back office infrastructure, what do you suggest as like starting brokers as far as back office infrastructures like TMS, load boards, maybe hiring agents if possible, starting off there?
Well, I mean, you just kind of said it. So I would advise, it depends on if you're going to operate out of your home from the onset or not. It also depends on how big, what you're seeing down the road, how large you really want to get. So it's a very gray area there, a very difficult one for me to answer directly because it's not a specific question. I can sort of address it and come, take bites all around the apple to try and give you a response there, but some of the things are, again, the tools that are needed, the requirements for your authority, your insurance, your surety bond, the costs associated with that. Or if you're going to have an office staff, your overhead, starting out, I would say, so far as dispatching, if you're going to dispatch yourself, you can entertain just doing it by yourself or having one other person. But I can tell you this much. Once you start doing anything at all with any type of volume, it will become hugely overwhelming to you, particularly if, you're going to do the billing and the whole back office part. It becomes a nightmare because you find yourself you're being pulled at several different angles, and you're finding yourself to the point where it's difficult for you to do the billing. So you got to bill your customer, you got to compensate the truck, along with all the other things that come along with dispatching the truck and being responsible and receiving load tenders and accepting load tenders and attempting to find carriers to haul the freight and making sure they deliver on time. It becomes very overwhelming. Financially, super great. But a one-man show, if it's going to be a one-man show, you need to keep in mind that, you want to do small increments and always leave yourself the comfort zone so you're comfortable in what you're doing, because you don't want to be pulled away so much from accepting and moving freight, which is your money. You want to pull yourself away from that so that you start doing somewhat of a sloppy job at that, to make certain that you're billing the shipper and you're getting paid and you're compensating the carriers. So you have to balance it and become very well rounded. Just have to keep that in mind, I think. I don't know if that answers it, Charles, but I'm attempting to.
Yeah, that's fine. What was your infrastructure like, or your TMS system? I think I remember you said it a while back, but when we was at the hotel conference room, you had a large TMS system at the time, right?
Yep, we sure did. And to date, in my opinion, it is the best one on the market. It is the most expensive, but it does things that will blow your mind. It's called McLeod, MCLEOD.
Yep.
Power broker. It's very, very expensive. But it does everything in the world. Now, there's a lot of copycats out there, and not to knock any of them, but some of them have some of the features they've mimicked or attempt to mimic some of the features in McLeod, but usually they're limited. So McLeod has, some of these other companies, they might have one feature or even three, but they don't have, say, 50. Okay, you go to another one, they might have this one the same and then a different one, but not the 50. McLeod is totally power packed, and once you get on your feet financially, I got to be honest, I would encourage people to take go look at McLeod. And I think you'll find your job becomes easier, because what we experienced was this: one dispatcher can comfortably, without exaggeration, move the amount of freight that 5 dispatchers could. And it becomes easy. Everything, for the most part, is like one click of the mouse. So even there are features in the TMS itself, the software, as opposed to 3 to 5 clicks, usually there's or 1 click, occasionally 2. So it speeds the process. It will put you at command center. I mean, you'll be at the driver's seat flat out. You'll be, in a position where, you look on if you have 2 or 3 monitors, and it's like command central. You've totally got everything at your disposal. Everything comes to you easy. Even if you were to make some of your existing carriers aware, there's modules that you tie into this program, and you can get 1 click, and then your load availability that you've entered into your system can go out to, for an example, some of my carriers, I would click the mouse 1 time, or the dispatchers would, and 730 emails would blast directly to the carriers that haul for us most frequently. And I would actually tell my staff, during that time, I think we had like 24 dispatchers, so we're medium-sized brokerage. And I remember in the past, soon after we software and started learning it, I would actually say to my staff, I'd make an announcement and say, okay, you guys ready for the phone to ring? All right, be ready, here we go. And I would go click, and in 1 to 3 minutes, the phone would just shower, just totally unstopped. People calling in, asking questions, about the load availability, and expressing an interest in the load, wanting to know the rates, the availability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A wonderful program to keep people based out of Alabama. I don't work for them, so they're not paying me anything to share this with you. It's just that we had the software, and I flat out loved it. Never seen anything quite like it.
What was the cost of that, if you remember, the price of that one?
In my case, I spent $241,000, but initially I think we spent, and they financed, by the way, I think we spent it was like $110,000, but I did ask for some additional modules that are not necessary for everyone. But we ended up dumping, like I said, over $250,000 in it, because we were able to take other pieces of software, not even connected to that, and my in-house IT guy was able to connect a lot of the things. So ideas that I was able to come up with, that I presented, he was able to somehow make it work. But McLeod's a very good program, very, very good people. They do finance. They do training. It's down in Birmingham, Alabama, if I remember. I went down for a week. And, the support is relatively good. Many things on there are self-explanatory. I think one of the things, just to give you guys some idea, that can be very, very attractive for you as a brokerage startup or an existing one is there's something that we implemented in called continuous moves. If you want to talk about making money, there it is. So you have carriers, and you know this, you guys. So you have, for an example, if I can give you a quick example, Charles.
Yes.
So you've got carriers. Let's say that you have a shipper in, I don't know, Kansas City, Missouri, let's just say. And let's say they frequently ship loads to Houston, Texas. So obviously we all know it would be wise if you also were fortunate enough to pick up a shipper count customer in Houston, Texas, so that you could then in turn reload that same carrier, which would be a continuous move. So in other words, you're moving that. So you got 2 moves out of that truck. So now you're doubling up on your money. So there's a program in there that afforded for that, for an example of continuous moves. Just one of 1,000 features that it has. It's very, very mind blowing.
Okay. What without giving us specific numbers, but what was your annual what was you making annually at your peak, like when you were doing with your full blown brokerage?
I think at the peak, I think my peak, and again, I was only but so big. I think the very so far as gross revenue, best income was, I think, I can't remember, it's 24 or 27 million. That's a gross revenue number. And I'll share with you, the best net income, in-house take-home income, I think probably my very best during that time was just upwards over $7 million that came directly into my household with my wife and I during the time. Yes.
Okay. So it is possible to just realistic numbers, right? Okay.
It's absolutely possible to. You've got to want to do it, and it will require some work. The key thing is getting shippers and keeping them. And then when you hire folk, folk are folk. Okay, so you've got to hold their hand for an extended period of time. And eventually, you'll sort of weed out the good into the bad, and eventually you'll get a crew, a team that, relatively, reliable, and that's what you want. So over the years, I got to the point where at 5 o'clock every day, I could go home, and separate myself from work, but yet know the revenue still coming in, yes.
Okay. So take us through the day in the life of a freight broker, from the time that you accept a tender from a shipper to the time that you invoice that shipper for that particular shipment, right? And everything in between, like high level, nothing, you don't have to get real granular or specific with it, but just overall.
Well, here again, so you've got your relationship developed with the customer, your shipper or customer. Each customer is going to vary. Some load tenders just come in via email. Some load tenders are to their load tendering process. Some come in via EDI format, whether it be Sterling, Nestivo, or whatever method, or combine that, or some of those methods, depends on the shipper. Usually the size of the customer determines what method they send you over load availability. But there's still such a thing as a good old telephone and having conversation real brief, or a simple old email. That still happens. So once you accept a load, here's one of the things, and there is a balance. So when you accept the load tender, the expectation immediately becomes your baby. You accept the load, you better be prepared to cover that load, period, no matter what it takes. Okay, you've got to get it done. And that's the type of drive that you need to be successful. So you want to cover the load, you want to be pleasing and attractive to your shipper so that they will continue to give you freight, and that will increase over time. Okay, so you accept the load tender. You've got to know your truck availability. What we would do is, in our system, of course, and no matter what system you use, most systems has the ability to do that. You can enter in your truck availability, your dispatchers, drivers call in from a previous load. But then you have history. So you've got the history, and you should be able to look into your software and see the traffic lanes that those trucks usually, entertain. So then that then becomes, your confidence level becomes stronger, depends on the lane. So if you've got a carrier who frequently has hauled his load in the past, or whatever the case, and has called you multiple times and said he's emptying out in New York City, wanting to go to Atlanta, Georgia, and then your customer has freight picking up in New York going to Atlanta, Georgia, well, cha-ching, okay? So, that becomes immediate gold, right? So the likelihood of you covering it without too much difficulty becomes very, very favorable. All right, but either way, so, you set load tenders, okay? You make carriers aware. Now, whatever method you choose to do, a load board is fine when you're starting out, but never rely on a load board. A load board is not the holy grail. The holy grail is you developing a relationship with the trucking companies, okay, and the drivers. Probably drivers even more than the trucking company. We could talk about that another time. But you do that, okay, and then you kind of know the direction that you're going, okay? So you accept loads, all right? You make the loads available. What's always good is for you not to have to call the carrier to ask for a truck. It's always better if that carrier calls you and asks for a load, because if he calls you, then he's expressed an interest. So you're 2/3 of the way in the door. If you call him, your odds become diminished drastically. He may or may not have availability, or may not have interest. But if they call you, it's expressing interest. So anyway, either way, kind of moving on, Charles, I'm trying to determine how to respond to this in a fashion that will make sense to everyone. Okay. All right. So that is done. All right. So you have a relationship, or you may have a new relationship even. So then you're going to trade credentials. So you send them all the pertinent information on your company, and of course, along with your broker carrier agreement that you want them to sign. You want all the pertinent information. You want to know where his truck is offloading at, so then you can judge how far he's away from your pickup point. So you don't want a guy who's 400 miles away. Okay. You want to get some at least verbal indication as what time he expects his truck to be empty, and stack that up against the time that your cutoff time is for your load to be picked up, or your scheduled time to be picked up, and all that has to make sense. Okay. You move forward. You trade credentials. You want to hear from that driver. It's great to talk to the dispatcher, but it's greater to talk directly with the driver. Always talk to the driver. Load is moved, load is picked up. You want the arrival time. You want to hear check calls. You want to know when he arrives at the facility. You want to know when he is loaded. Okay. When he returns, you need to know the time. So you're looking at the time frame. You want to know when he arrives. You make him aware of everything. You want to know when he's empty. At that point, the brick leaves your shoulder. Okay. And at that point, you're now waiting for signed PODs. So we can do the billing to the customer, and you can compensate the carrier, because he's going to send you typically the invoice along with bill of lading or proof of delivery. And then you're going to expect your funds to come trickling in your bank account.
Okay. Let me see. I got something in the chat here. Oh, just someone just saying sorry they're late. Okay, good. Anyone has any questions?
Charles, real quick, can you tell me who is what's the name of Erwin's brokerage?
I'm sorry, Charles. I don't know if they were addressing me, but I couldn't hear them.
The name. What was the name of your brokerage?
Freight Forwarders Corporation, man, was one of my brokerages.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. So you're no longer active?
No longer
as a
active.
broker?
Retired from that business and only do sales now. I still have a relationship in logistics. I do freight procurement for 2 large brokerage operations, and I do advanced logistic training. But the actual operation, I retired from that about 5.5 years ago.
Got it.
Freight Forward. You said Freight Forward Corporation, right?
Freight Forwarders Corporation. You have the 3 diamonds, the FFC.
Okay.
If anyone's been in the business for any length of time at all, they would recognize the name, at least from New York down the coast, down to Florida. Anyone's been in the business, 9 out of 10 people would immediately recognize the name.
Okay. Let's see. Key, did that answer your question, Key, the one you had earlier?
It did, yeah. Sorry, I appreciate that.
Okay. Let me see something else in the chat here. Terry Harrison said, how old should your broker's MCB number be before trying to solicit shippers for their freight?
You're asking me, Charles, now?
Yeah, I was just reading the question because it was in the chat.
I'm with you. I'm following you. The answer is old, right? Listen, you can start out with a new number. Not to be totally discouraged with that. Is it more attractive to have an old number? Absolutely. You do a little searching. People do have old MCs for sale. I've got a couple of them, but that's not why I'm talking to you today. But I've got a couple of them for sale. But yeah, old MCs again make you look very, very well established, and particularly with shippers, and even with carriers. Carriers feel a little more stable about getting compensated, you know, with the old MC number, because they figured if you got a 200 or 300 series number, then if you were a shyster or a bad fellow, you know, you could not have stayed in business all this length of time. So it kind of, you know, just the obvious. Shippers also, they look at it like this is not some new kid on the block who doesn't know the business well. They're very knowledgeable, ought to be after this long extended period of time. So an old MC number is very attractive. Not to say that you can't start out with a brand new MC number, kids, you can.
Okay.
How much are your MC numbers for sale?
I don't know. I'm just trying to be competitive. I know. Just looking about 2 weeks ago, was Googling some MC numbers. They were in the 200 series. They weren't quite as old as mine, but they were close. And they went for like 75,000. Fairly large company. They wanted some, you know, massive clout, and they were willing to pay 75,000. And you know, they gained that MC number, but it put them in the door with some government accounts that were massive. You know, like 10, 20, $30 million annual, you know, accounts per year.
Oh yeah.
So I'm open to reasonable offers, but anyway, go ahead.
Speaking of government accounts, have you worked with government accounts, or you know about the process with that, Erwin?
Not a whole lot. We did over the years. We did 2 accounts. Gotta be honest, it became not the easiest pie to slice. Okay, and one of the things was it did cost some money up front, because usually with the government you have what's commonly, in addition to your surety bond, you have to have what's referred to as a performance bond. Okay, sometimes back during that time, at least, they could get extremely expensive. Don't know the cost today, but usually government, it is indeed usually always pays very, very, very well. There's a lot of competition out there now. Folks who have done it for a number of years, they know all the ins and outs. You know, today, don't discourage anyone. I certainly wouldn't discourage anyone to do that. Great if you can get in. It's just a road less traveled for our operation. It gets a little complicated, but the reward, no doubt, is really, really there. To the extent that on most of your lanes that are intermediate lanes or greater, you know, it's usually enough money to pay the trucking companies over $5 a mile or more, double that even. So if you can get in there, it's a wonderful thing to do. Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Yep.
But there's a lot of red tape starting off. Once you get past the red tape, then that's what you're saying. Okay.
You're home free once you get beyond it all. But you know, it's a hurdle to leap over from the onset usually. Unless, you know, when we did it in the past, it was both times.
So what about like ports and intermodal type stuff? You have any experience with that?
I have some experience with it. Certainly wasn't my niche. Do have some experience with it. A very competitive world. I think that usually, not to generalize, but listen, I don't mean to sound negative, Charles, to anyone. I can only speak for my operation. I would have no interest in it. The competition is unreal. There's so many companies that do it now, and what shippers find themselves doing with the containers, you know, the intermodal piece and containers, is they will dance because they have so many choices. They will dance from one trucking company to another in a heartbeat overnight. So it gets tough. It gets really, really, really tough. Much easier, though, for a beginning broker to acquire those accounts. Much easier if he has, you know, a brokerage side of the operation, but there's a cost associated because you have to usually provide the insurance. You know, you have to have trailer interchange. All that's easy, but you have to have the insurance. And, you know, usually it's done off of gross receipts as opposed to a typical amount for annual revenue on a truck. So it's a little different there, somewhat of a different animal. Not an animal that I've done a lot of that in, but many years ago we gave it some attention. A little complex. I think that three basics for anyone starting off is either refrigerated, flatbed, or van. They're the ones to get started on. And then if you want to venture out as you go down the road, you see an opportunity, then go ahead and take advantage of it in another area.
Okay, cool. Different resources that you recommend or you've used over time to go after shippers. I remember you had you brought it into the conference room when we were at the hotel, a blue book or a red book or something like that you were referring to. But different resources, in your opinion, different ways to go after shippers, different modes, I guess, if you will, in your opinion.
Well, I mean, there's certainly many. Some that I hold tight to my vest. But the blue book that you're referring to, and I didn't have the red book with me, but I had that too. They were booklets in which I had membership. Okay, I had membership with them, but it is an avenue if you're interested in actual fruit and produce and that sort of thing. Then that's a great avenue. It's laced with leads. Okay. For farmers or buyers of produce and that sort of thing, but that's what you're referring to, yeah. So yeah, that's and I obtained that book by having membership there, and relatively inexpensive. I don't know what it is today, but 6 years ago, for an example, I think the annual revenue, the lowest tier, I think it's around $1,500 a year. But along with that comes, the book, and not just the hardback book, but obviously, the CD that has everything on it, so you could filter through and get exactly what you're looking for if you want to concentrate on produce.
Okay, and then visiting. Someone just unmuted. What about like visiting customers, cold calls, things like that?
Well, what are you asking me specifically?
As far as targeting shippers, are those good methods as well?
Again, absolutely. If you're still talking about like Blue Book, is that what you mean? Yeah, that's it's a great method. I mean, because the information, it's information which you pay for. It's information, so it's chock full of information. It'll tell you what for example, if they were a farmer or a grower of any sorts, it'll tell you what they grow. It'll tell you what they typically what their revenue is per year for the dollars and cents of the amount of product. What their yield typically is each year. So that would be a good indicator as to the amount of business that they might have, and which would prompt you to say, hey, I want to lean this direction, or I want to lean in another direction. So it's very valuable information there. You have to pay for it, but it's very, very valuable information there to get that. And sometimes you have to make somewhat of a sacrifice, unless you already have a host of shippers at your disposal, and I think very few people have that. Then sometimes you have to pay for information to gain information, and that information still doesn't assure you a foot in the door, but it increases your odds like crazy.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Erwin?
I just want to confirm, you mentioned Blue Book. Is that, and you said it's membership. Is that the official name, or can you repeat that, please?
The official name is the Blue Book.
Okay.
Okay. It's for the produce industry. And then there also is a red book as well. Okay. Blue Book was the initial, and then they're both extremely old, but then shortly thereafter, there's such a thing as a red book. They sort of mimic each other. And anyone who is in the produce field, anyone that's a grower, any type of buyer of produce and goods, any farmers, your receivers, like your distribution centers, even for an example, your Walmarts, your Harris Teeters, your supermarket chains, they usually have membership with them too. And so those books or CDs are slammed full of information if that's the road that you want to take. There's a lot of information there. It tells you, again, their revenues. It tells you, usually has their salesperson there. And the good thing about it is, it has, usually has a contact, unlike a typical shipper who everything is closed door and there's gatekeepers. They usually have salespeople's names there. And the salespeople usually, sales type atmosphere, they are the buyers. And they usually are the right person that you need to talk to, the key player that you need to get your feet wet with. So it's money well spent.
And I just found the blue book. I just copied and pasted a link in the chat for those who were interested in that.
Thank you. Yeah, got it.
So,
Thank you, Erwin. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
anyone else? I don't want to hold you all night, Mr. Erwin. I know you got.
Yeah, and just
I'm limited to what I can see here, but I only see like a handful of names here. So I don't know how many folks are on board with this.
It's 12 right now. That's logged in tonight. Yep.
Okay. Right.
Sherry Ann, you was ready to say something?
No, I'm good.
yeah, that was me, Charles.
Oh, okay.
And just one more time overall, what is your advice to us new brokers starting tomorrow, fresh when we wake up, or Monday morning?
If this is something that you desire to do, don't give up. It is tough to get shippers, customers, but that usually is your biggest hurdle. But once you have succeeded that, then it's a downhill walk then usually. Okay. So and you don't want to limit yourself to one shipper. You don't want to never put your eggs all in one basket. But stay at it. Do not get discouraged. Shippers are not the easiest thing to get because there's you and a million other people, whether they've been in the business for 20 years, 30 years, or 1 month, that are knocking on shippers' doors. So keep in mind the competition is there. But so is the reward once you get your foot in the door. The reward is typically always there almost. So don't get discouraged. Don't be discouraged. It's easy enough to do, but be strong-willed and make up your mind. That you're going to sink your teeth in and I ain't letting go. Because once you get a couple bites off that apple, then you immediately feel 50,000 times better. It's a wonderful feeling. You start to feel confident, and then at that point, you just want to start multiplying. Okay, you want to amplify what you've got. You want to multiply what you've got. You want to do add-ons, and you want your headache to be counting your money. That's what you want your headache to be. That's a good headache to have.
By the way, did you start full-time, Erwin, or did you start part-time?
Did you start full-time or part-time when you first started, Erwin?
No, it's pretty much full. And I'll share with you a quick story. I'll make it brief, Charles. So I had a relationship. I don't know if you were on board when I mentioned it. My main largest shipper customer was Smithfield Packing, the pork processing people. And I started out with a handful of trucks, tractor trailers with refrigerated, temperature controlled trailers, and start moving their freight. And shortly thereafter, we did a very good job with them. They were pleased with our services, and they asked if we could move even more freight. Well, I know I didn't have the capacity in my own truck availability. I was limited to like 4 trucks during that time. So I said, if I could broker it, then we could entertain it. They said, well, you can broker it. So I said, okay, can you give me 60 days to do that? Meanwhile, continue hauling with our existing trucks. They said, sure. In about 35 days, I had my authority, and I started shopping around. And we kind of went from there. I started working out of my home, and in about 4 months, I rented office space. I hired 2 people, and went from there. And then after a number of years, we had 20-some dispatchers on board, and had 2 offices in Virginia, had an office in Central Florida, and then I started hiring agents to come on board to book freight, and I had 54 agents nationwide. So you know, we got to be a medium-sized operation, you know, over a few years. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So basically, you had to crawl before you walk, essentially, right?
Well, you do. You know, you have to crawl. But again, some of these things, Charles, can happen overnight. It's kind of good to know people and develop rapport, you know, that sort of thing. So it's good to utilize all the tools that are within your reach, because you never know when something might almost, you know, drop in your lap. It can happen, and occasionally does happen. So always keep your feelers out. You know, I tell new folks that are going to the broker business, have that in the back of your mind at all times. When you walk in the supermarket and grab your groceries, when you grab a can of spaghetti sauce off the shelf, look at the brand name and see the name of the company and where they're out of. That's a potential customer right there. You know, so anything at all that you do, keep in mind, there's literally nothing that you could see in or outside of your home that hasn't at one time been on the back of a tractor trailer. Period. I don't care if it's the lumber that the bricks your house is made out of. At some point, that was on the back of a truck. So transportation is alive and well, and will remain that day. You know, it's going to always be the case. Your television, your furniture, your forks and knives, your food in the fridge, anything at all that, you know, that you look at around you, other than something that's fixed already, like the mountains on, you know, if you're in a mountainous area, then there are things that God created. But, you know, anything at all at one point has been on the back of a truck. So, and you think about leads and a niche, everything is right there in front of you. So there you have it.
All right, sir. With that, if there's nothing else for Mr. Erwin, I know I don't want to hold you up any longer.
I'm happy to answer, you know, questions if anyone has any anymore, or if my answers you want more detail, or you know, you want to piggyback off of what I responded and hit me with another question, I'm very open for that.
All right, let's see. I got a few people in here. Let me think of one for you. Well, because you drilled me when we went in the conference room. I got my notes. I don't even got my notes in here in my office.
Okay.
Yeah, you gave me the advanced stuff, and I couldn't go through that real quick. But so I recognize the audience that we're with. Like, this is freight brokering for beginners, so I wanted to keep it on that level. So give me a scenario of a difficult situation that you overcame, as far as like in the movement of a load for a shipper. Something happened that you had to resolve quickly, or you would have lost an account.
Many things can occur. You know, you want those to be few and far in between. Case in point, truck does a no-show. Case in point, truck picks up the product. It's a very important. It has you know, it's an expedited load in the sense that it has a delivery time stamp on it. Driver breaks down. Those types of things, you know, be prepared. Those things can happen. You know, it's not frequent, and you don't want it to be frequent. But you have to come to the rescue immediately, because again, you don't want your customer to have his load delivered late. And if it's somewhat late, then you sure as heck don't want that to happen again for quite a while, because you can haul 1,000 loads perfectly, but the one that you make a mistake on is the one they're going to remember. That's always the case. So things happen. You know, I've had situations where truck broke down. It doesn't always work this way, but truck broke down. The product was fine. Refrigerated load, temperature was fine, but the truck went down. And I have actually, this has happened. It cost, you know, a fortune out of my pocket, but it was worth doing that as opposed to losing my customer. So I sent in another truck to actually hook to that guy's trailer, pay him still for the use of his trailer. compensated the guy from out of nowhere, paid triple, double to make sure that the product is picked up and delivered still in a reasonable time or on time. That would be an example, I guess, of what you're suggesting. So those types of things, happen. Again, you don't want it to be frequent, but things are going to happen from time to time, period. I don't care. You can have the greatest brokerage in the world, you can have a super driver. Things can happen, and occasionally do happen. So when they do, you have to revisit everything and determine what method that you can approach it to make certain that the product gets there. That's your ultimate goal, is getting the product there, period, by all means necessary. And again, if it means that the load pays you $3,000, you pay the truck $2,500, so typically there's a $500 profit in it for you. If it means losing that $500, so be it. If it means losing that $500 and an additional $500 to make it happen, so be it. Don't lose your account over one load. Okay, that money is made back up easy enough. Another load or two, and you're back to where you would have been. So that's the goal there. But yeah, things happen, Charles, from time to time. So many things can happen. You can have, a truck that arrives late to the point, then you got to attempt to find another carrier. You need capacity. So you have to pull the truck out of thin air. Those things happen. A carrier can say, hey, and it could be legitimate. You can say, hey, listen, they've got me here, granted, I'm only, 65 miles away, but they haven't unloaded me yet, and I'm not going to be able to pick up your load on time. So, you've got to go to the drawing board immediately. But, chances are, if you're doing your job properly, you probably had some indication of that an hour prior, because if you stayed on top of the game, you would have had conversation with him prior to that, and you'd have started to get concerned enough to look for replacement trucks during that time.
Mm-hmm.
So, you want to be, very, very, very step ahead-ish, in every way possible, to maintain, the smooth and rhythmic operation that most all people would enjoy and desire. So things happen, and there's times when it can get ugly. It happens every now and again, but you just want to make certain that that's a rare bird. That doesn't happen that frequently.
Okay, so proactive.
Proactive is a super word for that. That's a great description. I couldn't have nailed it. You couldn't have nailed it any better. That is the word. Be proactive in all instances. Always imagine. I don't mean this in a negative way, and I probably shouldn't say always expect the worst, but always be prepared. Always consider all the things that can occur. Have to be in a position, in the driver's chair, where you can fix the issue, and then on the occasions when it does occur, and it becomes a little less difficult for you to fix the issue.
Okay. Great. All right.
Charles, can I ask some of the folks that currently have a brokerage a couple of questions?
Certainly.
It's Agility, and I know that name you mentioned.
Agility Freight. They are they're refrigerated. They're produce and I think flowers. Sherry-Ann, correct?
Yeah. Yep. Flowers and plants.
Okay. Now Agility, they're starting their freight brokerage on the trucking side, over the road refrigeration, up and going. But they also do international, like air and
ocean,
the ocean and stuff. So
Yep.
they're versed in ocean and air freight, but they're starting off on the over the road side. So you want to ask them a question?
Right. It sounds like what you're describing is, in other words, they've done, I guess, intermodal or air freight or whatever, but now they're doing what you say on the road. In other words, surface transportation. In other words, domestic freight, truckload, ground domestic. Is that right, ma'am? Sherry-Ann?
Correct. Yes. That's where we're headed. Correct.
Okay. What part of the country are you in?
Florida. Lake Worth.
Oh boy, how about that? Good deal. All right. So you do have a history with produce then, is that right?
So we are fairly new to the produce, but we're partnered with someone who has a lot of experience, a carrier who has a lot of experience with produce. So
Gotcha.
we'll be relying on him and his expertise for a lot of things. Yeah.
So come June, um, will you have a clientele that goes in a northern direction when Florida becomes somewhat of a ghost town? Do you have?
Now, what do you mean if we have a clientele? Because we don't have any trucks, right? I mean, the person we partner with would be the carrier.
It meant shippers, customers, accounts.
Oh no, so that
Clientele shippers, right?
okay, no, sorry, no, we don't. That's part of our goal. That's what we're working towards, trying to secure shippers. We don't have shippers yet.
I understand. I understand.
So some of these resources that you've mentioned, and I know Charles has recommended some. We've been working different angles to try to build up our shipper base. You there? Hello?
Charles,
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay.
can she hear me now?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I was saying, can I give you a little bit of information that might be helpful?
Absolutely.
Okay. So here's something. So let's say that, you're doing, you're going to entertain squash or peppers or some green leaf vegetables, spinach, or some sort of greens, turnip greens, or whatever the case. There's just about, for almost every produce item that there usually is a place that you can participate in that there may be membership with, or a organization that hosts or governs that market. So always dig for that. If you can get involved in that, it's usually a walk-in. Memberships are usually fairly inexpensive for those. The case in point, North Carolina, for example, in Georgia, in Louisiana, there's something called the Sweet Potato Growers Association. Okay, so look those things up. It will give you a list of all of the growers. So if you, same thing with, say, peppers, carrots, anything that's grown out of Florida that comes out of the ground, corn, okay, those types of places. If you look those up, you'll gain valuable information. And usually those people are not too tight-lipped, and they usually, you sing like a parrot, and they oftentimes share information which might be very, very valuable to you so far as leads are concerned.
I just found the website and I just pasted the link in the chat.
Okay. There you have it. Yep.
Sweet
Thank
potato
you.
growers, Wilson, North Carolina, sweet potato growers, Boyette Brothers Produce, Birch Farms, CV Pilsen, Clovergrass Produce, Edwards Farms, Farm Fresh Produce. There's a ton of them. Farm Pack Products, Gary Thomas Farms, H&D Farms, Ham Farm, all in North Carolina.
Wow.
So,
And it sounds like what you're saying is for every commodity, there's pretty much going to be some sort of association similar to this.
80% of the time there is, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And you'll find leads there. And, just depends on your conversation. You may get names, you'll oftentimes get names there as well. So that's opportunity. So you can cut right to the chase.
There's a question. I got a question here in the chat too. It says, does your surety bond cover you financially if a driver has a reefer load that is lost due to faulty TCU or faulty refrigeration unit or APU due to mechanical mishap. So does the surety bond cover you?
It's going to vary from one scenario to another. The immediate answer is the surety bond. Okay. What happens is you become looking at contingent cargo instead of a surety bond. A surety bond usually is more apt to cover you as a broker when there's something that's done unfair or not legitimate to the trucking company. Like truck company hauls a load, you fail to pay him.
Right.
Surety bond will, if they file a claim, step to the plate, pay the carrier, but then surety bond's coming after you as a broker saying, hey, I realize you're my client, but you were wrong here. You need to pay us back. Okay, that type of thing. So it's a yes and a no there. It can happen. But usually with the scenarios you described, that's going to typically fall more under your insurance. Okay, quicker. Either way, you've got to satisfy your customers. That customer's important enough you don't want to lose them. You got to compensate them. So, the guy's unit goes bad. But then you, of course, want to then file a claim against the carrier's insurance. Okay, and don't let go. Okay, I mean that's what he has insurance for. So you expect if you have already compensated your customer, then you want your funds back. But if your customer will allow you the time, which is the normal proper procedure, then you will immediately go for the carrier's insurance. Because if that carrier, something happened on their behalf, okay, then you're not the carrier. You didn't have that load of corn on your back, so to speak. So, and nor did your sister, nor did your customer, your shipper. So you've got to be there. You got to stand in then immediately, and make certain that he is compensated. I'm referring to when I say he, your customer, for their goods that they have lost. So you immediately go after that carrier's insurance, and that's one of the reasons why when you trade credentials, you have that stipulation in your broker carrier agreement, that they have signed. So it stands up in the courthouse, so to speak. And you have insurance, and not only showing you're a certificate holder, but if possible, loss payee or additional, at a minimum, additional insured.
Okay. Did that help, Terry? Did that answer the question for you? Terry Harrison asked the question, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I didn't hear a response. I can't hear anyone other than you.
Yeah, I think she's probably typing in the chat. Yeah, she says thank you. Okay. All right. So you were giving Sherry Ann the sweet potato shippers and everything, and you were. So did you want to ask another question, Erwin, to someone?
Well, is it just one person in that type of business?
No. The one broker that just is focusing on reefer, but there are other brokers in here, brand new brokers, and I'm not sure what everyone's niche is. Key, what's your niche?
I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm thinking I'm going after dry van. So I did after we had that amazing call with Amy, and I forgot the guy who's under Mr. James' tutelage. After we had that call, Raymond. After we had that call, I did jump in because right now I'm a branch manager with the staffing agency in manufacturing and logistics. So I'm starting with my clients that I already have a relationship with. So I have DB Shanker who wants me to send over a broker package to look at. I got a note from one of my other clients, which we have a great relationship, but he has a great carrier that he's had for years. So I'm really just getting my feet wet right now.
I would say this, ma'am. Sounds pretty attractive what you just described. Sounds like, there's a very good, possible opportunities there for you to progress pretty rapid. I will say this, pros and cons, and mostly pros on this. With dry van freight, I think you just mentioned, is probably going to be your target. Not a bad idea at all. You don't have to worry about, stuff that typically that would go bad. And the other thing about that is most of, not all, but most of your deliveries are pretty much like a 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. type thing. So with that type of operation, particularly if you're just starting out, the likelihood is you can probably end your day. When that last truck delivers, you probably, for the most part, can hang up the phone and spend the time with your family and not be inundated with an issue, unless there's another truck that's en route that broke down that night or something and makes you aware. So that's a very positive thing about dry freight.
Yeah, so that's encouraging to hear, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right. You got any more questions for anyone, Mr. Erwin?
I'm guessing not. I just, and just thinking about it all, I know that, I can, if you want me to adjourn, I'm happy to do that with these words. I'm repeating myself. I said this before, but,
Well, before you say that, because I don't want you to leave yet, I actually have another quick question.
I knew it.
So here's one of the things we're trying to do, along with the cold calling strategy. We're looking at composing, sort of like crafting an email, right, that we're going to be sending out. My question to you is, did you find any value in crafting an email as part of like an email campaign that came just from your brokerage, as opposed to a particular agent from a broker? Does that make sense? I mean, just like a general email sending out to your shippers.
I think that, an email certainly cannot hurt. Okay. Here's something to keep it. What's your name again?
Sherry Ann.
Sherry Ann. Here's
Yes.
something to keep in mind. That idea is not a bad one. Okay. It certainly is no epiphany. So it's been thought of, a million times before, but it's not a bad idea. And I'll tell you what about that. That email can be tossed aside, ignored, or never opened. But at the same time, okay, let's say that if you send out that email and 5% of the key players, open that email, then, that's a decent average. Okay. So, but what you want to keep in mind is, it's fine to introduce like an introductory. It's fine that you're introducing yourself via email. Always keep in mind, you're one of 50 emails you received that day. Keep that in mind. So don't look for major things. But here's the good thing about it. Always voice your email in an attempt to briefly let them know what you do. Try and find something that's going to capture their attention. Make certain your email is not one you grabbed off of some website with the average broker or even the average broker training, that's going to say, here's a good spiel. Arrive at your own method. Let it be genuine and sincere, but not lengthy. Okay? And keep in mind, when you send that email, you want to let them know that you're going to be attempting to contact them. Okay?
Okay.
So it's like, it's pretty much like, hey, I'm giving you fair warning. I know you get 75 calls a day, but my name is Sherry Ann with ABC Brokerage, and I'll be calling you in a couple of days. Sort of like, remember my name, Sherry Ann with ABC. Okay, so you're kind of sending that subliminal message to them with your fingers crossed. Okay,
Right.
In doing that. Another thing that you didn't mention that I question you on is this. All right, so if you're sending an email, that means two things. That means you know who the ideal person is you need to talk to, and you have his email address. So my question comes to you, Sherry Ann, how did you obtain that information?
It would have been from an initial call, that first call, or off of just doing research on the internet. just trying
Right,
to
research
find.
sounds good, but the
Yeah.
initial call, that means you've already had conversation. So then if you're emailing, then you're doing somewhat of a follow-up, is that right?
Yes, in some cases, yes.
I got you there. I got you. So yeah, doing your homework, and I'm glad you said that. I'm really glad. That's a wonderful thing for everybody who's listening. Who what she just said was great information, and that was doing your homework. Okay, so and I think I mentioned it early on, Sherry, and I think you were probably online during that time, and that is do your homework on the shipper prior to calling. Gain all the information. I said it early on. Gain all the information on your customers prior to calling. You want to be knowledgeable. You don't want to call him and say, "Oh yeah, what do y'all ship out? Is it Canada?" Okay, you know what I mean. You don't want to do that. It's the guy's gonna say goodbye, right? Okay, right. So you want to have some background. You want to know that they ship out of plastic, polyurethane, plastic bags. That sort of thing. Now it's fine to ask what his destinations are. Where they ship to. That's great. But you want to have some idea, what they do. So you're on the right track, sounds like, Sherry, and also I would say yes. Sending an email, there's absolutely no harm in it. There's no downside to it. It can be helpful, and that's certainly something worth entertaining. Absolutely is.
Yeah, can I
Okay,
add to that
thank you.
too, Erwin, Sherry, I would definitely do the email just from a sales perspective because you want to stay top of mind. So at the minimum, they're seeing your name and they're seeing your brand. But what I would do in that email, I definitely agree with Erwin. Keep it short and sweet. But what I would do at the end of it is let them know you're going to be in their area Monday at 11 and ask them, does that time work for them? And what that's going to do, if it doesn't work for them, they're definitely going to let you know. But that's how you're going to start that dialogue.
Right.
Now, did you say
Thank
be in the area you're referring to a physical visit, or are you referring to a phone call?
Yeah, physical visit.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah,
If
because
you're
what?
shopping around for local customers, yeah, that would make sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know what? Thank you for bringing that up because in the event that it's not local, you can just let them know that, hey, I'm going to send over a Zoom invite for 11 on Monday. Does that work for you? And obviously, if it doesn't, huh?
Absolutely is. You're sort of giving them advance notice that you're going to attempt to reach out to them in a day or so. That's right. That's right. And you're right. You like I said earlier, you're hoping that they will remember, Sherry Ann with ABC Brokerage, which is what you just reverberated. You said, to remember your brand. So that there you have it. So you're right. We're both on the same page. And I think what I've shared with you is good information. I think you followed up with super information. I couldn't agree with you more.
Thank you
good.
both.
Anything else? Oh, let me see. Somebody typed something in the chat. Let me see. Oh, okay. Oh. All right. What else, guys? We can wind this down a little bit. I think we done spun Mr. Erwin enough, right?
Yeah, he's been very helpful. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do it.
Any other questions?
Hello, Mr. Erwin. It's Mr. Nelson.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Nelson.
All right. I've been around Charles ever since he started his game, and of course I'm somewhat relatively new to the freight brokering side of it. I was a driver for 32 years and 36 years around the industry. And I guess what I'm basically trying to bring into it is my knowledge of the industry, my knowledge of different facets of the industry. I mean, I worked from supply chain logistics to flatbed to LTL freight was probably one of the biggest things that I dealt with. I dealt with it for 21 years.
Yes,
And
so,
so,
you know a truck from a trailer, then, doesn't it?
yeah, I know a truck from a trailer, yes, sir. And I was in the seat for 32 years. So it's just more or less getting into the industry, getting people to recognize my knowledge and my experience in the industry. And basically what my idea of moving forward is actually becoming an asset-based brokerage, but
Okay.
definitely wanting to own trailers instead of tractors. and
Gotcha.
more
Yeah,
or
I
less
follow you.
looking,
That's
more or less looking.
what I did more so probably the last 14 years of my operation. I had a fleet of 53102 reefers, had owner operators pulling our trailers running on our
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
wise choice. Wise
And,
choice.
and basically, more or less trying to distribute some of that cost to operate on that on the back to the owner operator.
Right. You know, another thing that Mr. Nelson that you said there that I really liked is, you just said, being asset-based brokerage. What that does, and I'm sure you know that's your niche, is that puts you in a very good position, makes you very attractive to shippers, because we all know it's no secret that shippers typically, have a preference 99% of the time over someone who's asset-based. So you call on a new customer, and one of their first questions are, are you asset-based? And so, you being asset-based, having both authorities, can make you very, very attractive to a shipper. That, that is usually a shoe-in, probably, upwards of 65% of the time. So you've got a great idea there. I like that.
Right, and my goal is basically to purchase 3 trucks, have 3 trucks of my own, so I definitely have the assets. But yet again, at the same time, I'd like to have 50 trailers. Therefore, bringing on operators, I'm kind of flexible as to how they can run. Also, would want to be into the supply chain logistics end of it, more or less. Say, for instance, you find a shipper that has a distribution center that has outlet stores or something like that, and basically you could onset a group of drivers under contract. Of course, maybe they may need 10 drivers to run 15 stores under 120 180-day contract.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically where I'm going with it.
Everything you're saying makes a lot of sense. I'm in agreement with you. And just to share,
So break down, because someone just asked. I'll let you do it, Mr. Erwin. Someone just asked, what is the definition of asset base in the brokerage world?
Asset base is just that. In other words, you either own equipment, okay, or it's under your authority, okay, under your MC contract carrier authority, okay. So that someone either leased to you or running under your auspices under your MC authority, or you own, your own personal equipment. So you're asset based. You have physical equipment, right, that you totally control. It's not an outside carrier like a brokerage that you're putting, that you're arranging the transportation of freight. Instead, it's either your own equipment or the equipment is running under your authority. And that sort of ties into what I was about to say. Mr. Nelson, I was about to share with anyone who's listening. I think, and I don't want to go too far in advance for beginners, but here's something to keep in mind. You can revisit this once you get your brokerage going a little bit. Here's something to always consider. One, Mr. Nelson, his idea is a pretty darn good one, because you can make yourself much more attractive to these shippers if you're asset-based. I'm not telling you go out and buy 10 trucks, but I will say this. If you obtain contract carrier authority, but you don't want all the headache of ownership of trucks, you can have one truck, okay, that is leased to you. And even though, you have to obtain truck insurance, which is expensive, you can have that carrier compensate you for the insurance. You can back that out of his compensation for the loads that you're still really brokering him in the first place. But then on paper and reality, you are like Mr. Nelson. You have brokerage authority and you're also asset based. That will get you in the door with a customer 10 times faster, just to share with you. So there's something down the road. Your accounts, but when you start to feel yourself grow, it's not a half bad idea that Mr. Nelson has, not at all.
Okay. Sherry Ann asked a question to me, but I'm gonna put it on you guys, either Mr. Nelson or Mr. Erwin. Can you break down how fuel surcharge is calculated?
Okay. If you're talking to me, or is that something Mr. Nelson wants to respond to, I'm happy to. It doesn't matter.
You can go ahead and take that, Mr. Erwin.
Yep. Give me the tough one, right? Okay. All right. So, it depends on. There are pretty much two entities. One is National Fuel Index, diesel, whatever. They the name for it is this week. It changes twice a year, but they are supposedly a governmental authority, and they're able to gather the pertinent information from one location to another. It's all tied into a network. Without me working there, I can't go into too deep a detail, but they govern, so the question becomes, okay, what governs the cost of fuel? So all those things are nitzed together, and then they arrive at a dollar amount. Sometimes about a mile, and sometimes, but they have other methods. Some shippers can design their own. Some customers may, if they pay a fuel surcharge, they reserve the right to have their own entity, their own matrix that they design, and say, okay, if fuel surcharge is $2.75 a mile, then we're going to pay an additional whatever in dollars and cents. Okay. So that's the method. But the National Fuel Index, does pretty much that. They have their guideline to go by. So as prices fluctuate, so we all know that the prices here on the East Coast typically are going to be far different from those on the West Coast. If you go to the National Fuel Index registry, you'll see it's wide open. Anybody can type it up. Charles, you can bring it up right now.
All right.
And matter of fact, why don't you, if you can?
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll get some feel for it. They change the layout about every 6 months or so. National Fuel Index, or the DOE, better known as DOE, or see what comes up there. U.S. Energy's one, right? Then you click on that if you would, Charles. But yeah, so it'll show you, give you some idea. There you go. Bang, that's the East Coast. I just mentioned that East Coast, West Coast. There you go. So there's a date. So a week ago, it went up 4 cents, went down 4 cents, that sort of thing. So there you have it. As a matter of fact, it depends on your customer. If your customer pays a fuel surcharge and they go by that, then you can readily go there and know how much fuel surcharge to bill them for when you go to invoice your customer.
Mm. Okay.
Because it has the week prior. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, well, this guy picked up a load last Friday, so and the fuel index that on that day was $2.86 per gallon. So as a result of that, we're going to charge this dollar amount, whatever his matrix is. Yeah.
Good.
And I'm sorry. So that matrix that you talked about, that you're referring to, and I guess this is something that you would develop as a company yourself, that you can use. But can you just walk through like a simple example, meaning, let's say the rate is $2.50 per mile, and you're going 400 miles. How do you factor that in?
So I think what you're trying to ask, whether it's an all-in rate, which includes the fuel surcharge, or if it's just a line haul rate and the fuel surcharge is on top of it, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. If the fuel surcharge is on top of it, how do we go about calculating that? I mean, there's got to be a basic formula, right?
Yeah, again, like I mentioned earlier, you may not have heard me. Some shippers have their own methods, so you will have that from the customer. This is what they pay, and by law, they have by right to do it their method. Others tell you that they go DOE. So just one second, man. Charles, can you go to the DOE? Let's see if they changed. This website has changed. Let's see if that the diesel, the DOE. Let's see. There was a diesel. Their website was much more easy. Used to be. I haven't been there a few months now. See if that shows you retail. You see DOE. Let's see.
Department of Energy fuel prices.
Yeah, it's pretty much all the same thing. You can just tool around in there, ma'am. I apologize. It's not like I don't own trucks now for years. So it's not like I've been in there recently at all. But that's one of the right. Well, Yeah, that's it. Yeah, they're all it. The website to go to, and you can break it down. But so what happens is some of them will have, and Charles, what I can do, if you'll remind me, I will send you a spreadsheet of some of my customers that we had that has that, and it will show it. It would let the lady know she was inquiring. It would really make sense to her. And it will have it. It'll say, for example, we're going to pay you 12 cents, or whatever case for every gallon, whatever the fuel was 285, you get an additional 12 cents, on the gallon. And typically, ma'am, it was based on, I think it's 5 or 5.5 miles per gallon. Okay, so then you divide your miles based on that. I think that kind of answers sort of where you're going with this. But usually they have a metric on there that breaks it down for you. I don't see it right now, but it's there. If you'll spend a little time in there, I think you'll stumble up on it. But yeah, and then some shippers will say, this is, they're going to pay this if it's between $2.70 a mile and $3.10 a mile, whatever the case. Went too far up in numbers, but we're going to pay you an additional this amount of money, pay you an additional that amount of money. So then you tack that on based on those mileages. You tack that on and you add it on. But it's a separate, in other words, you want to itemize it when you bill your customer. So it's an all-in rate as far as dollars and cents, but you're gonna line item it. So you're gonna have line haul, $2,021, fuel surcharge, $319.15, or whatever the case. So then it becomes cumulative. You add it all together and arrive at your total. But that is very typical in this business. And some shippers, just to let you know, some shippers may not, in that sense, pay a fuel surcharge. They refer to it as an all-in rate. And as a broker, I would suggest to you to don't get into the headache part of that fuel surcharge. Okay, that carrier can call it whatever he wants to call it. When you send your rate confirmation or load confirmation to them, you're going to give them an all-in rate, okay, or what I refer to as a all-inclusive rate. You don't want a headache. You got enough headache as it is, covering your loads and doing your day-to-day business. So you send them an inclusive rate. So that's an all-in rate. Now, if he wants to separate it and say, okay, she sent me $2,400 and $2,250 is line haul, and she gave me another $150, then he can do it. He can separate it however he wants. Okay, you want to send him a totally inclusive rate. Anything above that becomes an enormous amount of additional work for you, and it can get very high, very sticky. So all-in rate for a fast-paced freight brokerage is generating dollars and cents. I would totally not go down that road. I would factor it in. Here's the all-in rate. Whatever y'all negotiate, this is what we're paying. That's the approach that I've always taken, and I will continue to take today.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else? All right, guys, this has been a wonderful experience. Let's see, flat rate quoting. Oh, okay, Mike was just making a comment. Okay. No other questions? Good questions, great questions, good answers, great answers. Mr. Nelson, are you good? I think you were.
Yeah, I'm fine, Charles.
Okay.
I got everything I needed out of that situation, yeah.
Okay. All right. And everybody else is just listening. Willard, what's up, Willard? And okay.
Hey, Charles.
Yes, sir, Mike.
Sherry Ann and Willard want to be in the hot seat.
Okay. So, yes. Sherry Ann and Willard, you guys want to be in the hot seat for?
No.
Okay, we'll do that next time. What we mean, Mr. Erwin, is we usually we were starting to do like mock calls. I was gonna we're getting close to the end of time anyway, so I probably won't do it today, but I was gonna have you pretend to be the shipper and have one of the brokers call just to get, a mock call, calling the shipper, and just to get the experience of what to say and how to critique that, and going forward. But
oh, that's interesting. That's I kind of like that idea.
Yeah. So no one wants to call you right now. You're a shipper. So does anyone wants to call Mr. Erwin? Mr. Erwin to be the shipper, and obviously you guys are brokers. So anyone want to take a stab at it? Okay.
Okay, we got that response.
Yeah. Crickets. But see, the beauty of it though, it's good experience, and this is a recording. You can go back and watch it, and you get pointers. It's good to get the pointers ahead of time, so when you actually do call a shipper, then you'll be like, okay, I'm certainly not going to say that because they said don't do it this way or don't do it that way. So, but anyway, that's cool. That's cool.
Charles, I don't mind trying and taking a shot at. Is this with Erwin? You said?
Yeah. So you're the broker, Key, and you're calling. You're doing a cold call in your script or whatever you want to say to him to try to win the load for him. So, and you're going to call Mr. Erwin. He's going to be the shipper. Let's see how you sound. Okay.
Okay. Ring, ring.
Good afternoon, transportation.
Hi. May I speak with Erwin?
Actually, you're doing it. This is Erwin. How can I help you?
Hey, Erwin. This is Shaquila with Kaizen Freight Brokerage. How are you today?
I'm on top of the world. Couldn't feel better.
Nice. Very good to hear. Hey, I wanted to catch up with you real quickly and find out what current challenges are you experiencing in your shipping operation right now?
Wonderful. You know what, Charles? I got to stop right here. Folks, her approach is so far, maybe I spoke too soon. Perfect.
Yeah, I knew you was gonna say that.
I want to dissect. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead. I knew you was gonna say that. That's why I didn't say that. Go ahead.
Okay. She asked me what type of challenges are we experiencing right now. The most pertinent question in the world, right there. Okay. Period. But I may throw a curve at her just in a second here. But wonderful approach. Okay. Well. Let me attempt to respond. Okay, so we've got we shipped to 48 states. Okay, we shipped to 48 states, but some of our traffic corridors out in the Midwest, they are seasonal, and what we find ourselves experiencing is the time of the year that our freight becomes abundant going there is the time of the year that the carriers are doing other products, and their revenue is extremely high. So we're not able to compete with the dollars and cents on that lane at the same time. We got to serve our customers. So, Shaquila, tell me what it is that you all have to offer that's going to fix this for us.
Okay, and if I'm hearing you correctly, so you're saying that you ship to 48 states, and some of the traffic corridors that you have out in the Midwest are seasonal, so you're having some pricing issues, so rate, not capacity issues. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, the truck availability tends to be there to some degree, but they're not knocking at our doors during that time of year because they have an abundance of freight to pick and choose from.
Okay.
What do you have available for us?
Well, what I wanted to do was just get a bit more information just so I can understand your operation and understand what are some of the issues that you're experiencing, so I can kind of go back, take a look at it, review it, and tell you what value I'm able to bring to the table. With that said, I will be in your area on Monday and would like to drop off my broker packet and kind of talk to you about some of the ways that I feel like I can improve that process for you. Do you have time to speak at 11 on Monday?
I'll check my calendar. If you'd like to send us an email. I'll have the opportunity to respond back and see if I have time to sit down and chat with you for 20 minutes.
Okay, sure. That sounds good. What's your email?
Emails ABC. You know what? This lady's pretty good. I like her approach. She actually danced around when she hit a snag and she didn't have an immediate answer, which is going to happen. She was able to fluently dance around that, but still maintain my interest. Okay, she didn't lose me. She didn't freeze up. Okay, like most folks would have frozen. She didn't freeze. She didn't know the answer to it, but she bought herself some time. And guess what? That's very attractive to me. Okay.
Nice.
And so I would say very, very good what you just did. I'm very well pleased with your approach. And I like
Okay.
it a lot. And I think it's something that everyone needed to have grabbed this. I wish there was an even larger audience, Charles, to have witnessed this. But you've got it recorded. Like
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
good thing. Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
let's play this over and over and over. Great. I'll take my hat off to you, lady.
Yeah,
Very
and
good
you
there.
know, and I
I was
appreciate
going to
that
corner her,
feedback.
and I did not corner her, and that's very good.
Yeah, and I appreciate that feedback, Erwin. So going back to your question, because that's the issue / fear that I'm dealing with, because obviously B2B sales is my thing. So what's not my thing is the trucking industry knowledge.
I got you. I got you there. I'm totally with you. You know, to give you some idea, I think the reason why, you know, I was able to respond to you, you know, just now and make the comment that I did. I don't know if you were on on Zoom with us early on, but I'm retired from the industry. I've been doing this for over 31 years, and for the last 5.5 years, when I retired from my businesses, I do sales for one massively huge third party, you know, 3PL company, and that's what I do, sales. Okay, so I do that. I approach shippers, and that's how I immediately knew that your response, you know, for you to be able to fire back with a decent response was very, very, very good. But I do this. This is what I do, you know, for my living now. One of the main things that I do is I do sales. So I approach, you know, new leads and customers all the time. So that was pretty doggone good. I really liked that, and that was a type of response that I would have given. So I don't think you could have nailed it any better.
Okay, and so just for real life, in terms of you having the traffic quarters of the Midwest and you're having pricing issues, how could I have responded to that if I wanted to? And I'm gonna tell you, what I'm gonna be doing is staying away from selling myself on the initial call, and that's because I do want to get in front of that client and build that relationship from there. So really what I'm going to always be doing on the phone on the front end, and I encourage everyone to do it, is just to fact find, just keep that focus on the client, because they want to know that you care about their business. They don't really want to hear about you, but I know that I'm going to at some point need to respond to some type of inquiry on what can you do for me.
Yeah, I said that earlier, right? You're right. So you're reiterating what I said earlier. That's exactly right. You know, it's not a matter of you know, singing a song saying you're wearing a gold necklace, as much as it is attempting to solve their problem. Okay, and again, usually you'll find out that they'll bend the rules when it comes to funding if you're able to solve their problem. Okay, so if you remember, I mentioned to you that the truck availability is there, but not necessary for them, because they're getting high dollar freight right now that time of year from other sources. And you may or may not necessarily want to pay a ridiculous amount of money, but usually if you can solve their problem, then, you know, they have a willingness to bend the rules. So in cases like that, you know, you're gonna, you know, if you've done your homework prior to calling that customer. So let's say that customer, again, is indeed, you know, out of the Midwest corridor or whatever the case. So let's say Ohio, let's just say that, or Indiana, whatever case. So if you've done your homework, then you would know, you know, the truck capacity there. Okay, you would know if there's, you know, 15 loads to every four trucks, or whatever the ratios are there. It's just good to have all the information backed up, because you never know when you run up against an Erwin, you know, as a customer. Okay, so what happens there is, it sounds like you're able to do that, but what you would do is the truck availability. So if you knew that you've got an abundance of equipment that are offloading within a reasonable amount of miles from there, then that became, now you got gold in your hands. Okay, because you're able to provide something that the average broker, let's say, may not be able to. The other thing is, if you're asset based, here's something else to keep in mind. If you're not necessarily asset based, keep in mind, I'm talking to everyone now with the brokers, keep in mind, a lot of customers want you to have the availability of dropping trailers. Okay, not the easiest thing to always do, but there's no law that says that you as a broker cannot have a relationship with a trucking company who has, a fair amount of equipment that can actually afford to drop trailers. You dropping trailers is more than the equivalent of being asset-based to a shipper, a shipper's eyes. Keep that in mind. I just want to repeat that. You having the ability, having a relationship with a trucking company, carrier, who can drop trailers makes you equally as attractive to most customers as if you were a contract carrier and you were physically asset-based.
Good point.
Okay. So yeah, Sakila, wonderful job. But in cases like that, sometimes, there is no win. Be prepared to bow gracefully on occasions. Okay. That can happen. Yeah. Okay. If you cannot provide the equipment, you can't provide it. Okay. If he's not willing to spend $5 a mile, then he's not willing. So be prepared. On occasions you'll stumble up on that. You won't be the first one. That can happen. Okay, but always try and pick all the information from him. And as much as you hate it, there's times, and they don't always answer you. Well, there's times when I just come out and say, hey, listen, in order to make this happen, tell me where you need to be. I'm talking to the customer now, potential customer. Tell me in dollars and cents. Tell me where you need to be. Okay? If he shares those figures, and 40% of the time he might, then take those figures, get back with him, like you said. Take those figures and see what you can do with it. Okay? If the volume is there, okay, then forget the greed mode. Forget the greed, G-R-E-E-D, greed mode, okay? Make your money in volume, okay? If it's easy, if it's an easy traffic lane, if it's an attractive lane, and there's not a lot of tolls, if all the discouragement is, if it's not mountainous, if it's not a freezing cold area, during the winter months, or it's 30 feet of snow. If all the favorable things are there, harden the dollar amount, okay, and consider what you're doing and entertain it and invite. This guy says, listen, I can give you 35 loads a week. Well, that's not to sneeze at. That's a decent little account. This guy can consistently give you 35 loads a week. Forget about making $250 to $500 a load. Settle for $175. Okay, and provide those trucks. Pay those trucks what they need. You want the carrier to be satisfied. Okay, the more likely he is to be dependable, reliable, and consistent if he's compensated to the point that he's pleased and happy. So that all parties involved, it's a win-win for all parties involved: the carrier, your customer, and yourself.
Exactly, because 35 loads at 175 every week, that's $6,000 a week take home net. So, I mean, hey, I'm good with that.
There you go. There you go. And you know what? That scenario I just described to all these new beginner brokers, it's not a stretch. Okay? It's not exaggeration. Some of these numbers are very, very realistic. You just got to keep plowing until you stumble upon them, but they're out there. All right, Mr. Charles, if anyone else doesn't have anything left.
Yeah, can I ask you something about that situation, about that scenario too?
Sure, Mr. Nelson.
As far as that freight and unable to fill the capacity in that lane at that particular time, doesn't it also work as far as getting that lane filled when those shipments ship, whether or not the capacity, say, will be available, say, within a 5 to 7 day period, if it's shipping at a later date? And also, with that being said, the rate on the lane is subject to change also and fluctuate within a 5 to 7 day period.
Yeah, Charles, I apologize. I kind of heard bits and pieces of what he said. I didn't really grasp it. Did you grab it a little better and maybe
Can you repeat it, Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah, it sounds awful, but go ahead. Let me attempt to go ahead.
Okay. What I was asking is that, say for instance, on that lane, in the time that freight ships, whether it's within a 5 to 7 day period, and we also know that in a 5 or 7 day period, capacity can change on that lane. Also, at the same time, we know that in a 5 to 7 day period, freight rates can also fluctuate in a different manner on that lane. So in dealing with that customer, couldn't we basically, if he's not in a hurry to ship that freight, still take a look at it and give him maybe a projected rate, or in accordance to what the possibility of the lane may do within a 5 to 7 day period?
Well, yeah, I mean certainly that's a possibility. I guess I'm just but based things on history.
Okay.
Last thing you mentioned, it fit like a glove. The first thing though, typically, again, it depends on what you're hauling. With my background in refrigerated freight, it's not a, it's hurry up and get there. I'm truck right now and it needs to be there tomorrow. You know what I mean? So it's more, similar to like an expedited atmosphere. So it's not like, well, I'll tell you what, we'll pick that up, say 7 days from now, or 5 days from now, like you just described. Certainly there's freight that like that, I'm sure. Okay. Again, usually stuff, unless you have locked in rates, established rates that have been on the contract, then, and even then oftentimes, people are people, and they realize, things change from day to day. And if they got to get their product moved, they got to get their product moved. But, there's also times when if you're fixed in, you may have to spend money out of your pocket. I mentioned that early on too. But, rates, listen, there's something called negotiation. To sum it all up, Mr. Nelson, there's something called negotiation. And, the market changes. And this year, a year and a half, could not have been a better example. And I think it's due to the pandemic, which threw everything topsy-turvy. And still, we still haven't, gotten back home yet. Okay. But, as a result of that, I have never been in this business 31 and a half years, never seen or witnessed or experienced rate fluctuation like this before ever. I've seen, some high birds fly, but never quite like this. I'll give you guys a quick case in point. There's a traffic lane right now on a commodity. I've got like four businesses. A couple of them on small scale and 2 of them on medium size scale. I buy a product and it's an aggregate and I sell it, and some of it goes to the government. This is the government, for an example. And where normally I pay $2.50 per mile, and the trucks stand in line and beg me and call me Mister. Okay. Right now though, they're getting $4.50 a mile, up to $6 a mile. And if I were to say I'll give you $3 a mile, then you would have thought that I'm a comedian on stage. They burst out laughing. It's a joke to them. Okay, it's like, really? Okay, so so in this sense, I'm taking the approach. It's my product. I'm like the shipper, so to speak. Okay, I'm paying the freight on it. Okay, so then I have to make adjustments, which is what you just described. So I have to make a consideration. How bad do I need this product? Does it make sense for me? So I have to make an adjustment and willing to come up to, at least the $4 mark for them to consider hauling the freight at this time. So in that sense, you're 100% correct. And usually most of the time there's some stuff that doesn't matter, but most freight, typically kind of needs to be, it's a scheduled date, unless it's not processed. If it's something just being generated, then the dates can be pushed out. But otherwise, product has to be picked up and delivered, usually in some sort of a timely fashion. So, but yeah, what you said is, you're on the right track. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. The market is on fire for carriers right now. Keep that in mind when quoting. Okay. All right. I think our time has come and gone. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Erwin, for showing up and giving us your expertise and knowledge and information. I'd like to thank you guys who are the members here coming into the training tonight. Our next training will be Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, thank you, Mr. Erwin. And
Sure. Welcome.
And everyone else, thank you guys for showing up again and enjoy your weekend. Good
Yeah,
training.
thank you, Erwin.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Thank you, Erwin.
All right,
Have a
all
good-
right.
Thank you, Charles. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thanks, Charles.
All right, guys. You're welcome. Have a great weekend.
Good job,
All right.
team.
All right, have
Bye-bye.
a great weekend, everybody. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right.